Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here with our second preseason team and Supercoach discussion of the Carlton Blues. Special guest from the Code Sports team, Tim Michell. How are you, mate?
Oh, Swish, you can never have too much Blues, can you? I know you had JP on recently to talk a bit of Carlton, but great to be with you, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No problems at all. Before we jump into today's episode, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via X, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 for me directly. Tim, how can the good folk out there find you, mate?
The Code Sports websites where you can find all our sort of Supercoach or sort of AFL content or any sport content really. Or otherwise, Tim_Michell, MICHELL, the ridiculous spelling of the surname, but that's how it's spelt. So jump on Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. And yeah, you can hit me up in the DMs if you got any Supercoach questions.
You definitely are, mate, and I was thoroughly enjoying your BBL content throughout that season, but we are now into AFL. So yeah, if you haven't followed him already, get on because Tim always puts up some great stuff. All right, we're going to jump into the Blues, mate. Your boys, we'll start off, mate. Expectations for this year, obviously it was a bit of a disappointing ending for last season. What are you thinking out of the lads?
Oh, mate, it's hard to be purely optimistic about Carlton after however many decades of pain we've had as supporters. But on paper, at least, the team looks very strong. And you'd have to think that the expectation it would be for a top four push. They just scraped into finals last year with a fair bit going wrong and a fair sort of few key players missing a lot of games throughout the season as well. But I think for the last couple of years now, we've seen under Michael Boss have had sort of really Jekyll and Hyde seasons where I think they started really poorly one year and then came home with a wet sail. And then it was almost the exact opposite last year. So a little bit more consistency would be nice. A little less soft tissue injuries, which have been a huge problem in the last couple of years. And hopefully a bit of luck might mean a top four finish. But I think when you look at sort of how strong Brisbane are on paper again, the reigning premier, and I expect Sydney to be around the mark and Geelong again. It's going to be pretty hard to get in there. So, fingers crossed the Blues are in that mix, but going to need a fair bit to go right for that to happen.
Yeah, well, you said the injury update, and that's a big part of it because you've lost so many good key players over a number of years. But so we've got the unfortunately knee injury to Nick Newman, which was ruptured to his left knee, which is just it's shattering because he had I think it was second in the best and fairest last year, absolute career year. Was looking fantastic, but outside of that, and Chincotta, who's got that hip. Kernell, Walsh, who's been struggling with a hammy, they're all meant to be ready, right to go. And I even think Walsh is back running now. So the talk is it could be up to maybe even 38, 39 players available ready to go for the match sim, as long as nothing happens until, from time of recording to the 22nd of Feb.
Yeah, it is sounding that way, mate. Touch wood. So I think the latest update about Sam Walsh, like you said, was that he's probably tracking a bit ahead of schedule from where they expected him to be from that hamstring setback that he had. So that's good news and sort of gives us a little bit more to think about for Supercoach as well because he's less than 600K and probably as much as I absolutely love Walshy and everything he brings to the Blues side, I'm always a little bit wary of him in Supercoach because I think that people look at Patrick Cripps and his size and go, well, he's going to be very difficult to tag. And then as soon as Sam Walsh gets off the leash, inevitably he's the one that they go and sit on. So I think that plus the fact that sometimes his kicking lets him down a bit is what tends to sway me away from Sam Walsh. But sometimes that doesn't matter if you're having sort of 35, 40 disposals a game, and we know he can rack up the footy at will. So good news to see him sort of, as we said, tracking ahead of schedule at the moment. I don't know, Swizz, if anyone will be planning on going near sort of Charlie Curnow or Harry McKay in Supercoach this year after the pain that they put me through and plenty of others through in the second half of last year as well with sort of injuries and their form tailing off as well. But yeah, as you said, Charlie Curnow is sort of being managed really closely throughout this preseason just to try and make sure that he's ready to go early on in the year. But again, touch wood, hopefully he can stay fit because we know sort of how important he is. And a big reason that Carlton sort of fell away late in the season was the fact that his form and then his body sort of let him down in the second half of 2024. So I'm sure Blues fans like myself will be hopeful that that's not the case again. But considering, as I said, the stress and the angst that they caused in Supercoach last year, to take a pretty brave person to go near McKay and Curnow to start the year, albeit, as we know, Carlton comes up against Richmond in round one. So if the Tigers are going to struggle as expected, maybe those two might feast early on.
Yeah, for sure there, mate. For my boys, I feel like they're going to get a good flogging from the Blues in the first week, and you still do have North Melbourne, West Coast, and those opening, I think, 6-7 rounds. So there are a couple of games.
The Tigers got close last year, didn't they? I think might have been in the second of the two games when Carlton was sort of wobbling a bit. So, look, who knows? Round one, funny things can happen.
Well, that is true. Funny things can happen. I have done an updated best 23. Do have listened to you guys out there and the who left comments in our last YouTube video with JP. Also, the training notes there from Nerds for Life. He does a beautiful job on updating everybody preseason. So definitely check him out. So I've been following that. So the big changes. I've still got Silvani, Wiedering, Sard in the back line. Boyd, McGovern, Ollie Hollins comes into that half back role with Nick Newman going down with that patella injury. Akers, Walsh, Doherty, who looks very firmed on that wing. Fogarty was probably by demand from the Carlton supporters who were getting into me since I had him sub last time. So he comes up to half forward, Mackay and Hollins, Motlop, Curnow, Williams in the forward line, DeConning, Cripps, and then Chera with Cowan, who's apparently having an absolute ripping preseason. Jagger Smith, Hewitt, and Brody Kemp, who I believe has been doing some training up forward. So maybe it's that third tall forward. And then Ashton Moy comes on as my sub. I've dropped out Cottrell because of all the reports about Moy. And you can see there on the training notes, there apparently has been very impressive this preseason. What's your kind of thoughts on that 23, mate?
Pretty much bang on. So it's the only one that might potentially change out of the team that you've got might be Silvani for Haynes potentially. I think Nick Haynes obviously been recruited for a sort of specific reason to try and strengthen that back line and provide a bit of support for Wiedering and McGovern. He's probably not sort of the ideal defender for what Carlton needed. I think a sort of Tom Barrass type probably would have been absolutely perfect, but to get him as a free agent as opposed to sort of having to pony up and give West Coast plenty for Barrass is the reason I'm sure that Carlton have gone down that path. So I think pretty much otherwise those 22 are just about bang on as well. And I don't know, like Moore was great as sub, like that'll be a pretty competitive spot, as you said, Cottrell and a few others probably in the mix there. But yeah, Haynes might be the only one that potentially pushes Silvani out. But there has been some pretty good word about Jack Silvani's move into defence and apparently showing some pretty good signs. So maybe he might just nudge ahead of Nick Haynes and get the nod early on.
Yeah, 100%. And I know in those training notes, he's got 259k defender, but he's actually a forward in Supercoach Silvani. And yeah, my latest reports and talking to a couple of Carlton supporters yesterday and even a couple of people involved there, it seems like Silvani, it looks like to be the third tall, probably ahead of Haynes at the moment, and maybe even that backup ruck if the Blues are only going the one ruck up forward. So it's definitely a must watch over preseason, because kind of that price, as much as we probably haven't seen Silvani be a super coach relevant person because he does get moved around a lot, but that third tall position can be gold, and at that price in our forward line, I think you need to have him at least on your watch list.
Yeah, so what do we think? Like, what do you think about that half-back position, Swizz? Because that could be sort of all important for Supercoach in particular. Like, what way they go with trying to replace Nick Newman, who was such an important distributor coming out of the back line for Carlton. If it's Sam Doherty, who's starting the year is mid only, I think that probably detracts a little bit from him. He's just under 500k, and I did hope we might get him a little bit cheaper, maybe even under 450k after he missed most of last year, but. It's tough to probably justify paying just under 500k for him when we've got so many good value options in the midfield alone. But then again, if he's going to play halfback, a role that he's done so well for the Blues before, by round 6 or round 7, he could be a def mid anyway. But then again, I think about that and I go, well, we've got as stacked a defence as we've had for a very long time in Supercoach too. So I don't know. Hollands might be just ahead of him at the moment, but it would not shock me if they went back to what's worked in the past as well, and potentially went for Sam Doherty coming out of defence and Hollands on a wing. But then again, those two might sort of swap and sort of play those roles at different times as well.
Yeah, I agree, mate. There is that possibility that they could swap. I know JP has been huge on Hollands. Pretty well when Supercoach opened, he had him in there. Did finish the year with a 90, 72, 116 and 96. So they're thinking at that sort of 330K price, he could be definitely one that picks up the dual position and be in sort of a really nice price, mid-pricer for us to, kind of potentially be a keeper in that back line, or at least be an upgrade target as them throughout the mid-year. But as you said, there is a word of warning there, because if things go wrong early, they do have the luxury of putting Sam Doherty, who has done it for pretty well his whole career. But the only probably thought would be, depending on how his body is it easier just to have him kind of on the wing and rotating with a couple other players more than, because I think as much as you'd expect the winger to do probably more running, the halfback's such a crucial position now, and is where a lot of teams start their attacking offense. And and maybe it's just probably the shift of sideways movements and the angles that you've got to kind of run in that situation. Maybe it's just easier for Doherty to run straight lines up the wing, depending on how he's been tracking.
Yeah, it's a good point. So, one of my knocks on Hollands has been sort of his kicking efficiency, and diving into the numbers. I think he goes at pretty much sort of 2 out of every 3 kicks hit the target throughout his career. Like both of the seasons that he's had on the Blues list so far, about 66% kicking efficiency. But I wonder, Swizz, whether playing at half back, sort of potentially being involved in a few more sort of switches and a few more transitions where he's not necessarily taking that difficult kick inside 50, or he's trying to spot up a target down the line or something. I wonder whether that might potentially help his kicking efficiency as well, and give him a bit of an edge that might help his Supercoach scoring too, that he might win a little bit more cheap ball across half back. And potentially be taking sort of slightly easier kicks than he has over his first few years in the system.
Well, it's actually, firstly, it's a beautiful point, but it is a big change going to half back where, you are trying to progress the ball down the line, but at the same time, we see so many players late in quarters do those little chip kicks to each other, and that's why so many defenders have the best kicking efficiency in the game. Where if you're kind of a winger or a half forward and you're trying to hit up a Kernell or Mackay, if they lead in the wrong spot, or if you haven't picked up their leading pattern, a lot of the times you see those balls not go where they're meant to go. And of course, that leads to a turnover, and that brings your kicking efficiency down. So much easier if you are at the half back, especially when the game, they want to slow the game down to get that kicking efficiency up. So if he can get involved in some of those cheap kicks, he definitely could improve that area, which obviously improves your Supercoach.
What do you like? There's no shortage of gun midfield rookies out of the super draft either, Swizz. But what are you thinking about Jagger Smith as well? At the latest reports out of Blues training seem to be spending a fair bit of time sort of playing as that high half forward, which can often be can get a bit lost there in Supercoach. But we know that he is so prolific as sort of a junior that might not matter, and he's probably going to swing through the midfield at different times as well. Did alarm bells ring when you heard that he was playing a bit across half forward, or do you think he's still sort of a lock, as most of us seem to think?
I still have him as a lock, and he's still one of my favourite rookies from this draft, mainly because you've lost Matt Kennedy. So I think that's, if somebody like him was still there, I would be more worried. I'm also, Cripps getting older, Walsh, always misses games because of soft tissue injuries. It's just the unfortunate part to him. So I think there will be at different parts throughout the season opportunity for him. You've got Kennedy, who played 23 games last year in that half forward and then still push up into the wing. So it might not be as good of scoring as we've had with Dacos and McKercher and Sheasel and all these guys who have played off half back. But I can't see him missing too many games where, kind of they're on the fence and go, okay, we're going to give this rookie a rest. I just think he's in there locked in. He's got a position where like at least at half forward in a team like Carlton, who are pretty attacking, are going to kick goals. So he's still going to find ball there, and then he'll get his opportunity up the ground at some point. So I still think, even if it's only mid-60s to start off with, I could see him definitely working into a 75 or 80 at parts throughout the season. He'll have games where he'll still able to find enough of it and go big.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think that was the main point I wanted to make, and I was hoping that people hadn't read the track notes and seen him at half forward and gone, oh, geez, I might take Jagger Smith out of my team and slot in, I don't know, Finn O'Sullivan or Sid Draper or one of the other rookies that I hadn't picked. I think he's still, one of the leading rookies for Supercoach this year out of that sort of 180 to 205k bracket. And I would hope that most people sort of aren't hitting the panic button and jumping off him just because he spent some time at half forward across one session. I would expect that he's probably still going to push up, might even be that extra midfielder at times as well. And he's definitely going to get centre bounces throughout the season until the Blues didn't sell the farm and move heaven and earth to get him during the trade period in that big deal they did with West Coast, just to sort of have him sit across half forward. Sure, he'll spend some time there, but I think he's going to spend plenty of time in the midfield as well in his debut season, and should hopefully rack it up for us.
And most teams do play 5 main midfielders. So you've got usually the 3 or 4 main ones where it's, you're going to have Cripps, Walsh, Chera, and then Hewitt. And then, like, I know we talked about sort of Fremantle of the booms and busts. There was sort of that 5th guy. In their case, it was a Matty Johnson. So I can see now that Kennedy's not there, it's most likely to be Smith. They might float a few other players here and there across it, but it doesn't seem like too many obvious guys compared to a Jagger Smith who, has got all the tools to come in from that first game. And even that first game, you're going to probably have a Richmond team that's either going to be debuting a Smiley or a Laylor. So wouldn't surprise me if when they're in the midfield that Jagger gets the opportunity to go up against them, because it is rookie versus rookie. Maybe against your Collingwoods and the Bulldogs, that percentage might drop off a little bit more. And then when you get back to playing West Coast and North Melbourne, maybe they lift a little bit of the CBAs, depending on the situation too. Like if you've got the game in hand at 3/4 time against the Tigers and West Coast, which is no Monty, but because we know how close the competition is. But if that was a situation, it wouldn't surprise me. They go, okay, here, Jagger, here's an opportunity to play the whole quarter as that CBA person, and we might, give Cripps or Walsh or somebody a little bit more of a rest up the forward line.
Yeah, totally. Nah, it's a good point, Matt. I could see that happening. So, what about, like, I'm pretty undecided on Adam Chera, and I think anyone who has sort of followed my content over the last couple of years would know that generally, sort of when I pick players, I tend to put the mods on them, and I don't really want to do that to Adam Chera because Carlton needs him and needs him to play well this year as well. But the more you sort of hear about his preseason and the fact that he's apparently flying on the track and even dropping behind the footy at times and winning some ball and using it well from sort of half back as well. But I think that might just be sort of rotating from the midfield. Getting pretty hard to sort of ignore the fact that he's under 450k, and we know that only a couple of years ago he averaged 108 in Supercoach. So I know there's a lot of options around about that price, Wiz, and like we want to fit in some premium midfielders, and we want to pick as many of these sort of gun rookies as we can as well, because they're going to be great cash generators hopefully for us. But has Cherry got sort of a spot in your team, or what are you thinking about him?
He's in that mix with Clary, kind of Miniguns Parish, Will Ashcroft, where they're all at least at the same price. And I feel like at the moment I'm more likely to start Oliver, but he is definitely somebody I can pivot to if that doesn't work out, or if I need to drop, because at the moment I've got 4 premium midfielders. If I need some cash to get one of my other mid prices sort of up or move something around, he's definitely an option for me to drop down for that M4/5 position and run both Oliver and Chera. They don't have that early buy this year, so that is something that does fascinate me with the Blues players. They do have those games early on where they are going to score some good points if all goes well. I think a lot of people forget that Chera was taken 5 in the 2017 draft. So that's with sort of Rayner, who's one of the best half forwards in the competition, Brayshaw, LDU, and then you got Chera in that. 129 games and 25 years old, which is right in a prime for a midfielder. And, we only have to look back a couple of seasons ago where, he did have that sort of career breakout year, and it was just sort of injury that slowed it down. But he had that, it was a 108. And that even still included with missing some games late in the season, but pretty well before that injury, he was going 111. So here's a guy who can do it. It's shown it in patches, but if he's going through scar-free in the preseason, looking to do everything right, he's definitely undervalued.
And then, so I'm looking at the sort of the ownerships as we talk, Swizz, and this is sort of being recorded in late January, so it'll change sort of between now and the season. But out of that sort of group that you talk about, like Oliver, Ashcroft, obviously pretty popular as well after winning the Norm Smith last year, and he's, I think, about 7K cheaper than Adam Cherry as well. So those two are sort of well and truly in that mid-price bracket. Like, they're the two that most people are wanting to get on. Adam Cherry is only in 5% of teams at the moment as well, so might be a nice point of difference option if, like you say, Carlton starts the season well with sort of a few, at least on paper, potentially easier games as well. But it's really going to be a case, isn't it, of how many of Oliver, Ashcroft, potentially Shearer, James Peatling as well, who's 100K cheaper than these guys, how many of them you can squeeze into your midfield with all these other guys as well. Like, I was toying with the idea of maybe running only one absolute gun premium. Like, I don't mind Zach Merritt's draw early on because they play a lot of early games, so he's an easy VC. Marcus Bontempelli, I haven't started without him for years, so he'd probably be the one I'd go to. But do you think there might be any logic this year to potentially going just one absolute gun in the midfield, hoping a few of these mid prices pop and average sort of 100 or 105 early in the season? Or is that just going to be too risky? Is it going to be too hard to get up to gun premiums quickly from some of these mid price guys?
It's a question I've had a couple of times. I think you need two. And the reason why I think you need the two primos is you need a vice captain and captain selection. I don't like relying on the rucks or the half back flanks as a backup captain. On most given weeks, you can find a way to go let's say it's a Bont into a Sarong or a Bont into a Butters or some combination like that as your VC to captain. So I want the two primos. Now, if that means it's one less of these mid prices and some people take the risk on it, that's fine. But I feel like you've got to have the safety net of those captaincy options. I think somebody like a Chera, it's also, he could be a good starter with the fact that Ashcroft does have that early buy where you could start him. And if it doesn't work out, it's an easy pivot because, as you said, that price, like Ashcroft's not going to go up too much in price, even if he has a hot start, where it's not going to be unattainable to get Chera to Ashcroft.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's the only thing that, that's one of the things I should say, sorry, that like I often think when I look at these mid-prices, I go, okay, so if I'm going to start 3 of them or 4 of them, everyone knows I love a mid-pricer, and then James Peatling averages 60 for the first 3 or 4 rounds, and then it's pretty clear that maybe he's not going to be the premium that I want. Like, what's my exit strategy? That's probably one of the most important things that you've got to have. You've got to go, how am I going to get James Peatling to, I don't know, one of the rookies that I missed out on? So for me at the moment, with the way that my midfield's structured up, like I don't have Sid Draper in there. So that would be a pretty easy swap after a couple of rounds. If James Peatling started slow and Sid Draper started hot and it looked like Draper had more midfield time than Peatling, you make that swap, you make 160K. And then if you've started another mid-pricer like Chera and he also didn't work out, there's 160K to turn Cherry into Zach Merritt or into a gun premium that you've missed. So yes, you got to, if that's the case, you've got to be prepared to sort of burn some trades to get yourself out of a bit of a sticky spot. But I think as long as you've got sort of an exit strategy and you're prepared to sort of be bold with some of your trades, you can start these guys as long as you potentially know how you're going to get yourself out of trouble if they don't work out, which we know can happen. Like, yes, there's going to be 4 or 5 mid prices that work out great and turn into premiums every year, but at the same time, there's going to be, for every 4 or 5 that does happen, there's probably 50 that don't work out. So you've just got to get lucky and pick the right ones, which obviously such an important part of Supercoach. You've only, we knew Swizz who those sort of 4 or 5 are going to be at the moment, but I can totally understand why. Like, I think if I had a pecking order, I think people have probably got it right so far. I've got Ashcroft at this stage of preseason like narrowly ahead of Oliver, but everything we're hearing and fingers crossed that Clayton Oliver continues to have a great preseason like it sounds like he's having, and we might get Clary back to his absolute best this year, which would be great for the Demons and great for Supercoach. And then I've probably got Chera third out of those three, but it's maybe an equal third with Peatling because Peatling's that 100K cheaper as well. So might be hard to fit all of those in, but I can see Adam Chera working out for those sort of 5% that have got him at the moment, or the people that want a bit of a point of difference in their mid-price picks.
Yeah, well, if he does really well in the match sim and in the preseason game, he will definitely come a lot more consideration for my side, just because I can see a world where I could start both Oliver and him, and then it gives me more weeks to watch Ashcroft, Parrish, maybe even Peatling, and make that move if I have to. But then if Cherry is popping off, well, it's fine. I've already got him, and then I don't have to worry about trying to get him into my side. So there's definitely, as you said, we need exit strategies if they don't work, and at least this year there's enough players in those price ranges that we can sort of swivel to if it doesn't work out.
What do you and the big one? I'm surprised it's taken us this long. Apologies because I've waffled so much. We haven't gotten to the ruckman, mate. But like Tom De Conning's currently the third most popular ruck pick in Supercoach. He's only 547K. I wish he was 457K. But in about 36% of teams as we record this, and only Harry Boyd and Tristan Cherry are in more teams at the moment as well. We know that Mark Pitney is such a big factor when he comes into the team. Tom De Conning scores so much less, but I think it's pretty understandable that TDK is reasonably popular. And my gut sort of suggests that Carlton will probably go in with one ruckman, because when they did play two ruckman last year, they just looked so unbalanced and sort of had to shoehorn Tom De Conning into different roles. And he was just so much more effective when he played as the number one ruckman as well. But what do you reckon, Swizz? Can you sort of see TDK rivaling Cherry and Gawn and sort of potentially English as well to be one of those big dogs in the ruck this year?
Mate, I can't tell you how many times I've swapped this position. This is the position that gets swapped so much. So TDK is in my side as we speak. It has gone from Flynn back to TDK, back to Gawn, back to T. It's like those three. So Flynn's probably dropped out of vogue for a little bit for me, and it's now down to, well, if Gawn's in, he's technically the R1, but let's just say Cherry's the R1, and it's who do I want to pair it with? And I really struggle to go, like, I've got the money to able to get to Gawn, and I like it, but at the same time, I see TDK's upside, but that's all depends on what they do with Pitt, and that's my big worry. All reports, as you were saying, is TDK seems to be the main R1 with Silvani in there. They've got the option, even if it's Hayes, whoever, that third defender to come up and play that second ruck role.
Yep.
They do look a much better side lined up as I've got it there, instead of having, say, Pitternet taking up one of those spots. Like, we know De Conning can go forward, so that does give them a little bit of something. I just think it's when Pitternet's not in the ruck, sort of what happens with him. It's like, okay, he sits on the bench and just kind of, and now you're kind of looking at a situation. It's like, okay, do they sub Pitternet out at kind of a 3/4 time to try to get some run in, which is all well and good, but that's dependent on if they don't get an injury to somebody else. And unfortunately, with Carlton sort of history, that's usually more likely than unlikely. So there's a lot of things that have got to fall into place for that system to work. I'd rather them play that. I'd even rather the Blues just sit there and go, okay, maybe when we're playing Max Gawn, for example, or Sean Darcy, that might be the only couple of times we play Pitternet. We might even give De Conning a rest that week, and Pitternet can come in and throw his body around against those massive rucks. But every other week, De Conning, you're the man, and we want to back you in. And am I right in saying is he still unsigned coming into the year?
I think so. Yeah, I don't like saying it, but I'm pretty sure he is. So generally, you get that spike, don't you, Swizz? The contract year, and you're playing for sort of an extra few dollars as well. It's just inevitable that you get that sort of spike. So yeah, that's a really good point as well. But you look at what Tom De Conning did in sort of that period, middle of the year last year, where Mark Pitney was out of the team. When he went on an absolutely incredible run: 131, 140, 146. then scored 176 in round 15. So there's his ceiling, potentially even higher, and then 128 in round 17 before sort of Mark Pitney came back into the team. So he could be just about anything for us this year. The big worry is sort of how his body holds up as sort of a number one ruck for the full year, because he's never really done that, but he's now been in the system for I think this is about his 6th or 7th year at the Blues. So hopefully we don't have to stress too much about that concern. And the more I think about sort of how the Blues structure up as well, I just can't see how Pitney would be in that round one team. They've sort of shown their hand in this preseason, haven't they? They want to play Brodie Kemp as a third tall forward. So you've got Kemp, McKay and Curnow. You've then got 3 talls, whether it's Silvani or Haynes. You've got Wiedering and you've got McGovern in the back line. If you're going with 2 ruckmen and those 3 at either end of the ground, like, you're getting very tall very quickly. And we know that footy so much now is about speed on the ball, and you can get run off your legs pretty quickly if you go in too tall. So I think if Carlton are going to go in with Kemp, and they're going to go in with Kemp playing forward and that extra tall defender, I think they're going to find it very hard to play 2 ruckmen this year. So I'm pretty bullish about TDK. I think he's in my team at the moment. I had Lloyd Meek there when I did my team reveal for Code Sports, and I still think Big Meek is going to have a really good year. But I think purely based on his ceiling, Tom De Koning's a guy that I want to have in my team, and I think he could be one that, potentially, if the Blues are playing a few sort of early games early on in the season, he might even be one based on that ceiling that you could look at as a vice captaincy option in Supercoach.
It was Carlton's last game that they played against Brisbane in that final where TDK started as the sub, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, mate. We don't like to talk about that one. I think it was 60 or 70 points down before Carlton even got on the board. So yeah, it was pretty ugly, and it was. I think it was just a sort of weird time of the season. Carlton probably pretty lucky to fall into finals with sort of some results going their way after they lost to St Kilda on the last day of the year, and then Port Adelaide did the Blues a favour getting over Fremantle, but so he wasn't properly fit, and I think they knew that going in, and then they just had to roll the dice because they were so far down. And you could see what a difference he makes to the Blues team as soon as he came on. Just they looked so much better in the midfield, and obviously that had a big impact around the ground against the team that went on to win the premiership. So yeah, I think he could be just about anything for us this year, both for the Blues and in Supercoach as well. And I can totally understand why, along with sort of Tristan Cherry and Boyd, who look like great picks too, that a lot of people are gravitating towards De Koning, because he can have such a big impact around the ground as well as sort of in the ruck and in the centre square for the Blues too.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is because teams in the off season analyze two things. They usually analyze their bad losses, especially their last game if it is a loss, and they analyze, unless it's probably maybe their grand final, and they usually always analyze the premiers. So it just happened to be that was the same thing for the Blues, and wouldn't surprise me there that there would have been done a lot of work going. You know how good we looked with TDK on the field. We know what he can do. We don't want this situation again. Maybe that's how we go. And I haven't heard anything negative from his preseason anyway, which is always a good sign. And yeah, we are right. He is out of contract. He is a restricted free agent. And I always say this, that boost. Some people's like, oh, it's not about the money. It's like in any job, if you know you're coming out of contract. You and I, if our contracts were up and we're putting in the extras, we're trying to do everything we can to just either keep our job but if there's an opportunity to get a promotion and that, you're doing everything for it. So that's how, mentally these players, they find that little bit extra because it could, for them, it could be the difference between an extra $200,000 or $300,000.
Yeah, so the numbers, Swizz, as well, just before you sort of move on, I'll go to your last questions, mate. Your listeners are probably sick of, or your viewers are already sick of me, but so without Mark Pitney in the side last year, Tom De Koning averaged 116 Supercoach, and when Pitney played, he dropped off by 43 points a game on average to 73. So it just makes such a big difference whether Carlton goes in with one ruckman or 2 ruckmen, and it's probably going to be a sort of nervous selection every Thursday for people with Tom De Koning in their teams, hoping that Mark Pitney is not named. But I just get the feeling, as I said, that I don't think Carlton, the way that they're going to structure up, can go in with 2 ruckmen this year, and Big Pitto might be spending a fair bit of his year in the VFL.
If Big Pitto isn't named round 1, and with the fact that we've got 3 early games with best 18. We've got the flex position. I'd probably be more willing to roll the dice than the other way around, because if TDK spikes massive scores, you're going to be ahead of the competition.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well most of the players covered to that. I know some people are looking kind of little Ashton Moy in there, the 119K, which the only problem is if he's a sub candidate, I'd be more hesitant on. I think there's plenty of other forward options, but if they were to get an injury or two, then that definitely becomes my preference would be he's not playing early on, and there were, you don't want to wish injuries, but if there were a couple of injuries later on, then he sort of comes in as a downgrade option. That would be my feel on that situation, but I don't think it'll work out that way for us.
Yeah, I think they probably want to play him as like that third tour, so I don't know if he'll play with McKay, Kemp, and Curnow in the same forward line. Like, again, you'd probably be getting a bit tall if you had the 4 of them up there. So I think where you've got him now is sort of subs, probably sort of how he might break in early in the season. But I think, like you said, Swizz, it wouldn't shock me if early on in the season he started off in the VFL and he had to earn another opportunity after he did look good in a couple of sort of sub appearances late last year, and so it showed some flashes. But I think he's probably still maybe 25th or 26th on the list, as opposed to breaking into the best 23.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it then comes down to matchups as well. And, I haven't mentioned like someone like a Cooper Lord there, who I know was brought up by JP. At least Ashton, he's 188 centimeters, so he's not like the massive tall. He can play that sort of hybrid role. But again, it's how many sort of talls can you do? I've still got Kemp in there. So I think it's a situation which the Blues haven't been in for a while. We're having potentially so many good players. It does make your reserves stronger, and that's what you want. You want this time of the year guys who are going to be missing out, so they're going to push harder to try to put pressure on some of these guys. And if it's Fogarty or Motlop or whoever there, and they have a couple of poor games, there's guys knocking on the door saying, well, if you're not getting the job done, I'm going to put my hand up and take your spot.
Oh, mate, we haven't even spoken about the bloke that polled 97 votes in the Brownlow last year, Patrick Cripps.
I think he's going
to be a pod every year, isn't he? I think people just because maybe because he's more inside, and he doesn't necessarily use the ball as well as some others. Like, there's probably a knock on him, but he had a really good year again last year. I think averaged about 105, 110. So I don't think you could probably go wrong starting Cripper either. But he's not one that I'll pick. But I know another of my colleagues in the Supercoach team, Chloe Williams, who's another Blues fan. Like, she's all over him every year. He's one of the first that she picks. So I think you'll get a nice pod there if you do go down the Cripps path.
Yeah, like, it's not a bad selection. I think it's just it's a solid selection. He's going to be around the mark. I just think there's other guys I'd rather try to look at him throughout the year. I don't think he's going to change too much in price. He's just, he's going to plod along, go his 110, probably pick up another 55 Brownlow votes and do his thing and
Doesn't he start? He starts on about 20, doesn't he? And then that's his handicap, and then they go from there. I really like, and this is just one to finish off, Swizz. I wish he was at 50K cheaper maybe, and I know he was sort of midway through last year, but I really like Elijah Hollands. I think if there was someone that might be that real point of difference pick, like he's only in 0.4% of teams as we record this, that potentially might push the top 8 or the top 10 forwards this year, I think he might be the one. So if you want, sort of that real unique pick from the Blues, Elijah Hollands would be the one I'd go for.
Well, I always say it's not always about classic. There's draft as well. So for those draft players out there, put Elijah Hollands on your list, because he could go really late and he'd be a really good option for your forwards. I
could see him averaging 90 to 95, which will get him in the mix for sort of that top 8, top 10 forwards. And certainly if you could get him in the 5th or 6th round of a draft, potentially, as people start to pick off the best forwards, I think you'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, for sure, mate. For sure. Well, I think that wraps us up, mate. I appreciate you coming on and talking about your beloved Blues.
Oh, mate, could talk Supercoach all day. So, especially with yourself. So, no, thanks for all you're doing for the Supercoach community. You and the Insider crew, love your work. And everyone that hasn't signed up yet, please get over to supercoach.com.au and sign up, and make sure you're getting onto codesports.com.au as well. And checking out all our Supercoach content throughout the season. Al Patton, who heads up the editorial crew, is doing a massive job this preseason, putting everything together. So, and I know our rookie Bible as well in sort of recent days, which Dan Batten and the fans have put together, has had a big update with all the best intel on the rookies. So make sure you get over to Code Sports and check that out.
100%. You guys do a wonderful job down there. You're all great people, and definitely, if you haven't checked it out, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. They have a Supercoach podcast as well, the official podcast that L's a part of. Tim jumps on sometimes, and so get involved there with that. Checking out all their content, and also check out, if you haven't already, follow him on X, because Tim does a wonderful job putting out content there too.
I appreciate it, Swizz. Thanks for having me on, mate.
No problems. Thanks, mate. Thanks, community. We'll be back soon for another team and Supercoach discussion. Bye.